Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, I'm going to walk you through my process of how I completed this painting. I often start with the lightest point in my sky and work my way outward to help prevent muddying the colors. In this case, I started with the pale yellow of the sun and gradually blended slightly darker yellows to oranges and pinks and eventually blues. I block in my clouds with a very thin layer of paint so that I can continue to build layers on top of them later. I usually start with the mid-tone color of each cloud. I paint these fluffy clouds with tiny circular motions and then blend them gently into the sky. This blurs and softens the edges. To block in this large area of blue, I applied the paint using X motions and then blended from side to side to get rid of brush marks. To create flatter, more stringy clouds, I use light side-to-side motions rather than circles, once again blending to soften the edges. I had to make many small adjustments while painting the sky. For me, the best way to see what changes were necessary was to step back and view the painting as a whole. From there, I was able to see that I should add more yellow near the sun and that some of my color transitions were too abrupt and needed more blending. With my adjustments made, I began layering in more shadows and highlights of clouds. The highlights on the clouds represent where light is hitting, while the shadows are areas not in direct sunlight. For this reason, highlights should always face the light source. I wanted these top blue clouds to appear much more randomly placed than my other clouds. So I took my brush and lightly swirled it around the top of the canvas, varying the pressure to create lighter and darker marks. I made sure not to cover up all of my light blue sky. To change the position of this large cloud and have some pink showing through behind it, I painted over it with a light pink color and continued adding details to the rest of my clouds so that it could dry. I made the highlights of these top clouds much more subtle because they are farther away from the light. The highlights of the other clouds got more and more yellow as they got closer to the sun. Similarly, the shadows also have more contrast or can become darker. With the pink color dry, I painted in the shape of the cloud and built it up from there with more highlights and shadows, again being mindful of where the light was coming from. The last change I made to the sky was to create more of a backlight behind the two large clouds. This brought more definition to the edges and made those clouds really pop out from the background. The point of blocking in is to get rid of the white canvas and give you an idea of what the finished painting will look like. When I block in, I am thinking about what color things need to be, and I am making sure that there are no major adjustments that need to be made to the painting. I blocked in the lighthouse with a light pink color on the side that would be facing the sun, and a gray color on the other side that would be in shadow. I used a palette knife to keep my edges sharp and straight. It can be very easy to add too much detail, especially when what you are painting is not in the immediate foreground. Because of this, I decided to focus on the light glowing from the top of the lighthouse and on giving the impression of individual bricks. To paint the glowing light, I focused on the colors around the light rather than on the light itself. I painted orange onto the top of the lighthouse and darker yellows on the inside of the glass to represent the light shining. I used my palette knife to scrape out the shapes of the windows, then painted the inside color, and finally used my palette knife again to place the frame of each window. To give the impression of bricks, I painted staggered rectangles of different colors around each other, keeping my colors lighter on the side that would be facing the sun. My goal when detailing is to have the area I am working on be basically finished, to the point where I am happy with it, but it might need some small adjustments later when the rest of the painting is finished. In general, as objects recede into the distance, less detail can be seen, and the color of that object takes on more of the color of the sky. Since the sun was directly over this cliff, I really wanted the sunlight to be shining brightly over the land, almost making the top of the cliff disappear and merge into the sun. I also added some shadows to help provide shape and form to the land and create interesting little crevices where the sun does not reach. When painting waves, I pay close attention to the direction and color. The wave should be the lightest at the top of the crest where sunlight hits, and darkest in the dip between waves. The rest of the wave is made up of mid-tone colors. When I paint the lines that show the movement of the water, I am careful to follow the direction of the wave as the water rolls up and over itself. Waves become smaller and closer together as they recede into the horizon. Since this large wave is close to the foreground, it can have more detail than the other waves. For this reason, I took time to paint individual dots to represent some water droplets coming off the spray of the wave. And and made the movement lines of the water brighter and easier to see. To reflect the light of the sunset hitting this shallow, receding wave, I blocked it in using the same colors I used in the sunset, but in reverse. This created a mirror-like effect. To detail the cliffs, I placed highlights where the light would hit the surface and darkened areas that would be in shadow. I avoided blending my colors to create more rigid edges. To bring more detail to the cliffs as they moved forward, I brought up both the intensity of the colors and painted thicker lines. This created more distance to the painting. I relied on my reference picture to decide what type of plants to paint and focused on arranging them in a pleasing way with no noticeable patterns that would look unnatural. To create distance here, I painted the plants increasingly larger, more detailed, and more vibrant as they moved forward in the painting. Like the cliffs, these rocks have 3 shades: a highlight, a midtone, and a shadow. To make the rocks look smooth and rounded, I blended the shades together to create a smooth transition from color to color, and to remove the hard edges. I placed the rocks where they looked pleasing and natural, then filled the spaces between each rock with more grass and plants to give the feeling that these rocks have been there for a long time. Everything in the foreground can be more detailed than the rest of the painting for the simple reason that it is closer and easier to see. I painted reflections under the rocks, the foam line, and under each individual clump of foam. Reflections should be slightly darker than the original subject and be distorted by the movement of the water. I create this distortion by softly blending the reflection from side to side. I lightened the movement lines of this large wave by painting over some of them with an almost pure white. I also used some thinned down paint to add water flowing over the rocks. To add detail to the sand, I painted some small rocks and pebbles, being sure not to place them in a noticeable pattern. To paint this washed-up tree trunk, I blocked in the shape and darkest areas first. Then I placed the midtones and highlights, and finally its shadow. Painting an object's shadow is a very simple way to add depth and realism. For this reason, I took care to include a shadow under each of these seashells. My last step of any painting is to look for simple improvements. I darkened the shadows on the lighthouse to build up its definition and depth. I added lighter highlights to areas in direct sunlight and backlit the cliffs in front of the sun to enhance the glow from the sunset. Putting the birds in the shallow water added some much-needed life to the painting. Finally, the waterline felt busy, so I used a Q-tip dipped into some turpenoid to scrub out a few of the foam clumps in the water. With those final changes made, I was ready to sign. I love creating art that challenges me and pushes me to become a better artist. Since completing this painting, I've taken some classes, and I am working my way through some different art books. I am excited to show you some of what I have learned in my next painting. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and thank you for watching.